Good morning, everyone. This is Alice Finizzi from the Disability Rights Fund, and welcome to our second Inclusion 101 series. Today is about creating accessible and inclusive communications for persons with deafblindness. So with that, I will turn it over to Carrie Thompson, our Senior Officer of Communications, Inclusion, and Analytics.
Thank you, Alice. A lovely Monday morning or afternoon or Tuesday morning to all of you. Thank you for joining this second webinar. And today we have a special guest who will be joining us. Her name is Haben Girma. And she's not yet online, but I want to go through a couple of notes about accessibility. I always like to start these webinars by talking about the accessibility features that we offer. So the first thing we have is international sign interpreters. If you need to make their video larger, click on their video and the three dots that are in the right corner, and then pin the video, and that will make it larger. If you want to focus on my video, you can do the same thing. And later when we have Haben, you can focus on her video too by pinning her video. The next thing that we offer is closed captioning. So if you look at the bottom on the right side, there's a closed caption icon. So when you click the icon, it should turn on the caption. If you change your mind about it, you can turn it off. The next option that we also have, we can also provide you with a direct cut link. So we have a professional captioner who is connected to the closed caption in Zoom. But if you need to make the fonts bigger or a different background, you can put it up through the cut link. So I'll demonstrate right now what I'm using. I'm showing the direct cut link. So it's easier for me as a person with visual impairment to also see the cut on a separate screen on my iPad, and I can use color inversion. So the direct cut link is in the chat. The next thing I want to say is that this presentation, part of it will include PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint are not accessible on screen share, but if you do need an accessible version of the PowerPoint, to go ahead and email info@disabilityrightsfund.org, and I will send you my PowerPoint later today, and it will include the alt text. The other thing that I want to say throughout today, when Haben is going to join us later, she would like it to be an interactive dialogue so that when she's going to present for a few minutes, and then she wants you to ask a question. And to do that, put your question in the Q&A box. It's at the bottom. And then Alice, my colleague, whose lovely voice you just heard, is going to read out the question for all of us. And I'm going to now believe that covers all of the accessibility features. Once again, I'm glad that you are all here today. This week is the start of Global DeafBlind Awareness Week. It's a week that really touches my heart because as a person with deafblindness, I want to educate other people about what it's like to be deafblind, what are the best ways to communicate with people who are deafblind. And as Alice mentioned, that I am the Senior Officer of Communications, Inclusion, and Analytics for the Disability Rights Fund and the Disability Rights Advocacy Fund. If you're not familiar with DRF and DRAF's work, what we do is we are an international grant maker based in Boston, and we provide grants to Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean on providing grants to advance the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and also the Sustainable Development Goals. So we believe that people with disabilities should take the lead in advocating for their human rights. So in honor of Global DeafBlind Awareness Week, what this webinar is going to focus on is how to provide accessible and inclusive communication for those who are deafblind. And one of the most difficult questions that people often ask, what does it mean to be deafblind? What is the definition of deafblindness? And I often have to say that deafblindness is two spectrum. It is about people, somebody who is deaf as well as somebody who is blind. And those two different categories can mean completely different things. It can mean that a person was born deaf and later became blind. It can mean that they were born deaf and blind. It could mean that they became deaf and blind later in life. And then within each of the different spectrums, so under the deaf spectrum, it could mean that the person is hard of hearing. It could mean that they're deaf in both ears or one ear. It could mean that with the help of a hearing aid or a cochlear implant, they may be able to hear something. The person could be somebody who speaks verbally or only signs or doesn't do either. Then the other side is the spectrum of for somebody who is blind. That could mean different things too. That could mean that somebody
speaking. Hi, Carrie.
Hi. Hi, Haben. Welcome. Welcome. So you have excellent timing. I'm about to introduce you. So I'm going to go ahead and give a little background about who you are. So Haben Girma, my dear, wonderful friend for the last 10 years. She is the first deafblind person to graduate from Harvard Law School, and she is an advocate for equal opportunity for people with disabilities. The President Obama named her a White House Champion of Change. She travels the world teaching the benefits of inclusion. She has also wrote a wonderful book called Haben, the Deaf-Blind Woman Who Conquered Harvard Law. This has been praised by the New York Times, Oprah Magazine, and the Today Show. Haben and I first met 10 years ago when we were both at the Harvard Project on Disability, and a mutual friend introduced the two of us. And people think that we often know each other because we went to Harvard at the same time. I graduated from Harvard Graduate School 2008, June 2008, and I believe Haben started on September 2008. So we just missed each other at Harvard, but we found each other eventually at the Harvard Project of Disability, and we've also been friends through many years, helping each other with learning sign language and helping each other learning Braille. Well, Haben is the Braille expert, so I've reached out to her on help about Braille, and she's been learning sign language the last few years and trying to practice with me. And so without further ado, I want to turn it over to Haben, who is going to share a few remarks, and then she's going to open up the floor to answer your question. So be sure to ask your question in the Q&A. So here is Haben.
Haben speaking. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the world. It's exciting to have an audience from all different time zones. I'm here in California, speaking from my living room. I'm sitting on a black couch with a white wall behind me. Thank you to Kerry for that great introduction. It's not every day that I do presentations with a friend, so it's fun to be able to do this with a friend. And also the fact that we're both deafblind, both went to Harvard, and both really love dancing, salsa dancing. We're also different, and it highlights how much diversity there is in the deafblind community. If you're going to take home one piece of advice today, it's that you should ask people what they need rather than assuming what a deafblind person needs or what any disabled person needs. Don't make assumptions. Don't say, oh, I went to this presentation with Haben and Kerry and I learned that you have to sign to a deafblind person or give Braille to a deafblind person. Don't do that. Everyone is different. So you start out by asking, what do you need? How can I help? I'm going to share some different things used in the deafblind community for access. These are guides, but you start out by asking, what does the person need? I'm a fluent Braille reader. Kerry is still learning Braille. Kerry's fluent with sign language. I'm very much a beginner and still learning sign language. So lots of diversity. For this presentation, I'm speaking by voice, and to access what people say, for example, what Carrie was saying, or questions that you all are going to send, I am using Braille for that. I'm holding up a device called a Braille Note. It's one of many different Braille computers. There's a line of Braille on the bottom. I run my fingers over the dots to feel the letters. So as Carrie was speaking, or when people send their questions, I have an assistant who's going to type on a standard keyboard what's being said. Then I'm going to read it in Braille and respond back by voice. This is the system that works best for me. Not many deaf-blind people actually do this. There are several reasons for that. One reason is that a lot of blind and deaf-blind people are not taught Braille. Sadly, it's assumed that if you can hear spoken words, talking books, there's no need to learn Braille. So a lot of teachers are skipping teaching blind students Braille. In the US, only about 10% of blind students actually read Braille. And I know this is challenging all over the world. We need teachers to teach Braille to more people. Blind, hearing people, deaf-blind people. It's access to literacy. When you're looking for a job, you're going to college, you need to be able to understand punctuation, spelling, and that's hard to do if you've never had direct access to words through Braille. So one way you can help the deaf-blind community is increasing Braille literacy through lessons. And there are some programs that do this remotely, where you take Braille lessons remotely. They will ship hard copy Braille documents to learn the basics and then advance over time. The device I use is expensive, and different organizations around the world will purchase these devices for blind and deaf-blind individuals. In the US, it's a vocational training program that will purchase these devices for students and adults to help increase access to education and employment. And then different governments and different charities around the world also provide these devices. It makes a huge difference to have access to refreshable Braille, instant Braille through these devices for individuals who are Braille readers. Tech helps. Sometimes one can't get it due to limited resources, due to all kinds of things. I don't need to tell you, you're probably way more familiar with this than I am. Everybody has some abilities. If you can't do something one way, try another way. So Braille is one way to do it. If you don't have access to Braille computers, find another way to have access to information. So, for example, print on palm is another method used around the world where people write messages on one's hand. They'll draw with a finger on one's hand the letter, or character, depending on the language, whether it's Mandarin or Arabic. That can be written on the palm or someone's back. There's sign language, and sign language is more of a language, whereas print on palm is more of just a writing method. And people should use and develop whatever abilities are available to them. There are also resources such as hearing aids, cochlear implants. Again, if one has those resources, those tech solutions can help a lot of people. There are some deaf-blind people who, with the assistance of hearing aids and cochlear implants, can hear quite well, and they will use accommodations like asking people to repeat themselves, having a voice transliterator. A voice transliterator is someone who repeats through voice what they hear. So an interpreter who stays in the same language and just repeats what they're hearing to the deaf-blind person. And they might do this in their ear, sitting next to them, or into a little microphone, and they'll use an assistive listening device to send this communication. There's sign language, and sign language, there are many different sign languages around the world. The dominant one in the US is American Sign Language. In France, there's French Sign Language. Across the pond in the UK, they have a completely different language, and it makes no sense to me. They call it British Sign Language. So different languages all over the world, because each deaf community comes up with their own language. But then the communities also interact. So you will find shared signs, even shared languages across regions. A deaf-blind person might have the vision to see signs close up to them, or one might sign into the hand and put a hand over the person's hands to feel the signs. Lots of different methods. So that is communication between people in person. We also have communication access to technology. When you're creating content, it helps to provide captions. This presentation has captions, for example. Captions is the text that appears on screen. I myself cannot see captions. Captions are visual, and there are caption settings where you can increase the font, change the background to make it easier to see for those who have the vision to see them. As I said, I can't actually see them. For me to access a video, I need a transcript. So provide transcripts, captions, and audio descriptions for videos. Audio descriptions are descriptions of key visual information in the video. Sometimes videos have charts, PowerPoints, and that information needs to come across to blind individuals. Audio descriptions help provide access because you're reading descriptions, you're saying what visual information is on the screen. For photos posted online, image descriptions. Social media is how a lot of people are sharing information right now. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. When you post photos on there, add image descriptions so that blind and deaf-blind people can access that content. I operate a smartphone and computer through a screen reader. There are many different screen readers. One is called VoiceOver, JAWS, WindowWise, and there are guidelines for tech developers on how to make websites and apps compatible to screen readers so that blind people who are using the app or website can also access the content. If you know any tech developers, tell them to use the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines for websites. And for apps, tell them to use Android and iOS accessibility guidelines. Testing by real disabled people who actually use these assistive devices is critical. So also make sure disabled people are part of the process rather than, oh my goodness, we have questions. All right, what's the first question?
Haben, sorry, this is Kerry. Can we pause for 1 second? I want to do an interpreter switch.
Yes.
Okay, Haben, continue.
Tactile learning is critical for deaf-blind children and even adults. I learn information best through tactile access. In this time during the pandemic, you can still have tactile access, but both parties, both individuals, should be wearing face masks, should wash their hands before and after the interaction. You should do everything absolutely possible to minimize non-essential contact. Learning is essential. So you can have interpreters, SSPs work with deaf-blind children. Just make sure that everyone is as safe as possible by using face masks, washing hands, and using other protocols. So the best way for me to help everyone during this presentation is for folks to send their question in so that I can address them. So if other people have questions, please do send them because that's how we get answers. There's one more, let's hear it. From Disability Rights Fund. How can public policies facilitate access to assistive technology and services for persons with deaf blindness? Money, that is the tricky question all the world over. Great question. I first, when I'm looking for resources, start locally. See if there's a local organization to help provide the funds, whether it is a government organization or NGO, such as local Rotary clubs. They may be able to help identify the funds or raise the funds themselves for assistive technology. If not, if local resources aren't available, then look into international ones like Perkins International, Helen Keller International, and the Disability Rights Fund in Kerry can also help find resources. I just gave Kerry more work.
This is Carrie. Yes, you did.
Whenever possible, put the photo in the main body of the social media post. So in Instagram and Facebook, put it in the main caption field. On Twitter, things are different because there's a character limit. Twitter has a setting where you can add an image description. You go into settings, and then there's an image description setting that you turn on. Then when you add a photo, there is an add image description feature that pops up once you've turned on that setting. And then that way it doesn't impact the character limit. You will see the letters ALT on the bottom left corner of the photo when an image description has been added. ALT is for alternative text. I went through Harvard Law School in 3 years, not 4 years. I would not have wanted to stay there 4 years. But to really answer your question, law school is just 3 years in the United States. Undergrad is 4 years. I went to undergraduate college at Lewis and Clark College, and then law school was at Harvard, and that was 3 years. Before I went to college and law school, was in secondary school. And in secondary school, in high school, I developed good study practices. Part of that was self-advocacy. I would practice telling my instructors exactly what I need, that I need materials in Braille, that I need videos to have transcripts, I need websites and apps to be compatible with screen readers. My teachers for the blind in high school and middle school would gently encourage me to go and ask my teachers and tell them what I need. So then when I graduated and went to college and later law school, I already had practice telling teachers what I need. So that helped. And also law school, Harvard Law School, kind of knew the law and kind of knew that they were required to provide access. So when I said, I need my textbooks in Braille, I need access to PowerPoint, they made it happen. It was not always like that. There are many colleges and law schools in the United States that refuse to provide access. It's illegal, but it still happens, and it's deeply frustrating for deaf, blind, and other disabled students. So we need organizations, schools to change and provide access, listen to students, listen to what we need, and then provide those accommodations.
This is Kerry
Question
speaking.
from Leah on whether there are any benefits to sighted people for learning Braille. If you are connected to a blind or deaf-blind child, maybe you're a parent, maybe you're their teacher or friend or assistant, then it makes it easier for the blind or deafblind child to learn Braille if they have a social circle, a family and friends learning with them. My parents did not learn Braille. And when I was learning Braille, I would go to them and say, "What's this word? What's this letter?" And they would say, "I don't know." That was lonely and frustrating. It would have been better if my parents also learned Braille with me and also learned sign language, so we shared more things and they participated more in my learning process. If you're not part of the blind students' learning process or a median circle, there's no absolute need to learn Braille for a sighted individual. It's kind of like learning another skill or tool. If you have the time, go for it. It's fun. It's another way to read and write.
Hi, Haben. This is Kerry. Can I interrupt?
Yes, go for it.
Thank you. I just wanted to do a time check that is now 10 something. Sorry, 10:39, and I know Haben is not able to stay the entire hour, and I'm grateful for all these questions that are coming in. If you have more questions for Haben, you can email them at info@disabilityrightsfund.org, and I will be happy to share those questions with Haben. I want to repeat two things that Haben said today that are so important. The first thing she said was the advice that do not assume, ask people with deafblindness what they prefer, what they need. The second thing I heard from her was a word that is so powerful, advocacy, to advocate for your rights, to help others learn that they can advocate for their rights. So I want to say thank you so much to Haben for taking the time to be with us all here. I always love listening to her presentation, and I always take them to heart for myself as a person who is deafblind. And I also want to thank her again for being here this week. And Haben, is there any more words that you would like to share with us before you go?
I'm really grateful people were asking questions, because sometimes you feel alone doing those presentations, but when people ask questions, you feel heard and seen and connected. If people have more questions, definitely email Disability Rights Fund. I also share a lot of information on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You could follow me there. There's information in my book as well. So keep asking questions, and you're going to learn a lot of great things from Carrie. Back to you, Carrie. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Haben. We'll do another interpreter switch before I start doing my presentation. Great. Okay, so again, everyone, hello, this is Kerry. I'm the Senior Officer for Communications and Inclusion and Analytics at Disability Rights Fund. And like Haben, I am also a person who is deafblind. And Haben shared her education background. And I'm originally from Louisiana, just outside of the town of New Orleans. And I grew up using sign language. I also have a younger brother who is deafblind. My parents and my older sister are all hearing, but everyone in my family learned sign language. So that was critical for me to have family support at home to be able to communicate one-on-one. I was mentioning earlier that I'm just starting to learn Braille. It's been about 5 years. I'm now fluent in all of the Braille letters and the contraction. I cannot read Braille as fast as Haben. I also want to share something that's exciting to show about the family support that I get, because my mom during the pandemic has been using this opportunity to try to teach herself Braille so that she can help my brother learn Braille as well. So as Haben said, it's really, really helpful to have family support or to have friends supporting you to learn with you, so that if there's something you don't see or understand, that is very helpful to have somebody else that you can go to explain what you see, but you're not sure what you're seeing. And as Haben also mentioned, that the deaf-blind community is an extremely diverse one. It's true because it depends on so many different factors of every person. For Haben and I, we are both two people who are deaf-blind. We both went to Harvard, but we have a different background. We have a different life story. We have different communication preferences, but we both love to dance. So going back to how do you define deaf-blindness, and I was explaining that there are two different spectrums under each. So under deafness, there's a whole category of different ways that people communicate when they are deaf or hard of hearing. And then the same for those with visual impairments or who are low vision. For myself, I can see a little bit. So I can see a very small window, and so that's why I'm looking at my computer to help me with my notes. I use color inversion because it's helpful for me and easier on my eyes to have a black background with white font. The other thing that I use is using Doom to magnify words to help it easier for me to see. But there are so many different tools that I use. So now I'm going to ask my colleague if she can run the slides for me. So if you can go to the next slide. So this is a slide that I showed last week during the webinar on how to have accessible and inclusive social media. Haben repeated a lot of what I shared last week. So if you missed last week's webinar, you can view on DRF's YouTube channel the webinar from last week. I also posted on DRF's Facebook page this morning, so you can read it there. The recording is also on the DRF Inclusion 101 webinar page, where you had to click to register. And today's recording will be made available by Monday of next week. So looking at the different accessibility tools, Haben already mentioned that she is using a screen reader and she's using Braille. She also showed you her Braille display. I have one here. And as Haben said, they are extremely expensive. For some of them, the average cost is about $2,000 US. So definitely the organizations she mentioned, like Perkins International and Helen Keller International, may be able to help in securing these type of devices. But sometimes we have to go back to the very basic, because we can't assume that everyone knows Braille. Haben said that only 10% of the US population who are blind know Braille, because technology has advanced so quickly and so far ahead that people don't think Braille is necessary anymore. But Braille is very powerful. Even if you know, even if you can use a screen reader alone does not teach full literacy. Braille teaches grammar and punctuation and all these different things that screen readers cannot. So it's really powerful to keep advocating for Braille education. So for many of these organizations around the world who are focusing on inclusive education, do consider the need for Braille education. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some other tools that I use as a person who is deafblind, and try to share some of these with you to help, no matter where you are in the world, if you are based in the United States or if you're based in Uganda. there are a couple of things that I like to do. One is I like a device called Big, B-I-G. And I am going to show you on my video, my phone. And it says, hello. Sometimes people will try to type on their phone what they're saying to someone who cannot hear. And that's a good strategy for someone who is deaf. But for someone who is deaf and low vision, having something like big means that they can make the words so much bigger. So let me show you again. If you touch the screen, you have the keyboard so you can type it, but if you are not great at typing, you can also go to the little keyboard and there's an option for somebody to speak verbally into the keyboard. So I'm going to say, how are you? There we go. If you really want to get someone's attention, you can shake it up and then it starts flashing. Sometimes I do this when I go to a restaurant and I'm trying to get the waitress attention. This app is free and it doesn't have to be only if you are in the United States. I'm going to ask Eileen if you can run the next slide. So on this slide, I am showing 5 different apps that are my favorite. The first is the big, that's what I just demonstrated. So if you go to your app store, if you have a smartphone, and look for this app called Big. I love it. I've taught my colleagues how to use it. Then I also love reading. If you want to read Haben's book, which again, I highly recommend, you can read her book electronically. And I still read books. I can no longer read books with the paper version, so I read them electronically. The next 2 apps on this slide are a Nook, it's like a little N, and then the one over is the Kindle app, which looks like the silhouette of a little boy as he's reading underneath a tree. The other app that I like, this one looks like a sun in the center, and this is called Be My Eyes. Be My Eyes is another free app. And this is something that when you connect to Be My Eyes, you get connected to a volunteer who will read something. So perhaps I have a, let's see, I'm looking around for something. Okay, perhaps I'm trying to find my water bottle. My water bottle is off to the left. But perhaps as a blind person, I'm struggling to find it. I can't find it. If I click Be My Eyes on my phone, and I can go around skimming the room. There is a volunteer who is looking at my video on my phone and trying to tell me what they see. And then they will say, stop. There's the water bottle a few inches in front of you on your left. Again, this app is free. It doesn't matter where in the world you are. So my colleague is based in Africa. When she came to Boston, I taught her about this app and it made her so excited. And I know she's still using it back home. And sometimes during our staff meeting, in the background, we hear her using Be My Eyes. So this can be used by anyone, anywhere in the world. It's run by volunteers. The other app that I like looks like it's a little O with 2 vertical lines. And this is the Otter AI app, which is a way to have voice to text transcription right in front of you. So if I have the Otter app on my phone and I'm in a meeting with several people, I don't have a sign language interpreter and I don't have a captioner on the Zoom meeting, I can put my phone next to the audio and Otter will transcribe what people are saying. Why this is a better app than something, say, like Microsoft Teams or Google, which has another way of having a live video meeting, and they provide caption, but they're too small lines at the bottom. It's very difficult for me to see. Otter lets you have the entire caption all across the screen, and I can move it up and down. So this is something that works for me. Next slide, please. This is a picture showing me. I'm wearing a red dress. In front of me is an interpreter who is using tactile sign language. Behind me is another interpreter. She is using protactile. Protactile is on the back or on the side of the arm. What it is information in the environment. What is happening in the environment? In front of me, tactile sign language is about what people are saying. So the interpreter in front of me is interpreting to me what the gentleman to my left is saying. Behind me, the other interpreter is drawing on my back where he's standing, if he's smiling or if he's laughing. And I'm going to give you a little demonstration now of protactile. Sometimes we say PT for short. Now, I don't have another human being in the room with me, so I had to get creative, and I'm using a stuffed dog that looks like a husky dog to demonstrate. So on the back of husky, I'm going to draw a straight line. This means somebody walked into the room from the left side. If I draw it from the other side, it means somebody walked in from the left. If I draw the line going out, it means that somebody left the room from that side. Now I draw a line going straight up, it means that somebody has a question. If I draw a line on the husky right side, that means that somebody on the right side has a question. If I draw it on the left, it means somebody on the left side has a question. If I do this thumb thing, in which I'm pressing my thumb as if I'm on the phone, that is telling me, that's telling Husky that somebody is in the room is on their phone. Now this, you can draw a smile, and that means a person is smiling. If you draw a circle, it means all people. So if I draw a circle plus a smile, that means all people are smiling. Now if I do this motion, boop, 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 tapping the back, it means people are laughing. If I do the circle and then doing the laughing, it means all people are laughing. Thank you, Husky. Now, another tool that I want to demonstrate, is it's very simple. It's not that everyone has access to technology. Some people may have been able to read, but as the eyesight got worse, they're no longer able to read small handwriting. So you can go back to using paper and pen, but instead of a pen, you're actually using Sharpie. These are the really thick markers. So this one is extremely thick, and this one's a bit thicker. So then when I write it on a piece of paper, it comes out like this. So the really big marker is the one on the top that says hello, and the one on the bottom is the smaller one. Now when I write and take notes, I use a Sharpie to keep notes. So let's see. This notebook is full of my Sharpie notes. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to move on. There are a lot of ways to try to be creative. And one of the other things that, again, Haben said that you need to be creative and not assume that everyone does the same thing. Protactile is a great way to help people who are deafblind understand what's around them. It's a great tool for people who are blind but can hear. Why? Because it's also important to have information around the environment for them without having to say, hey, the person on the right side just left the room. So just, keeping it quiet and just having like a little secret code to say, hey, they left the room, draw it on the back. I am going to go over to the next slide now. Okay, so nowadays, the COVID has meant so many new challenges that people can no longer touch each other, should not be touching. There are ways to continue to use tactile sign language safely, to put on gloves, to make sure you wash your hands before, put the gloves on, wash your hands again after using the gloves. Tactile is really good also because it helps give you a little distance that the person may be behind the back. I could say something like, I have questions, and then somebody could say yes or no. They can do, this is a sign for no. They could pinch my shoulder without me having to touch them. So it's a way to distance the touching just a little bit. So like many of you, I was feeling overwhelmed with all the information about COVID-19 out there. And a lot of the information was not relevant for people who are deafblind, or the information was not presented in an accessible way. So rather than get frustrated, I decided to start a Facebook group page that is called Deafblind Community COVID-19 Information or Resources. So if you go on Facebook and look for this group, this is where myself and 2 other friends who are sign language interpreters, we moderate every single post to make sure that it's accessible for those who are deafblind. We also take a lot of videos that perhaps the Center for Disease and Control puts out there, and they put it with an interpreter, but it's not accessible. Like, look at me right now. I'm wearing a black dress, and I have a sparkly necklace. Now, the necklace is prohibitive for me to sign to someone, so I have to remove the necklace. So now, this background is better. But sometimes interpreters might wear a V-neck, or they wear colors like that, very difficult to see the hand. I am a white woman, so I have to wear color that's dark. I have a black curtain behind me that helps me stand out better to someone with low vision. The black curtain is also easier on the eyes. So I recommend, if you're looking for more resources that's specifically for the deafblind around the COVID, this is specifically around COVID and how we are responding to COVID. Next slide, please. Okay. On this page, I am sharing 3 different articles that I've written for Disability Rights Fund that's on how to accommodate people on deafblindness. The first article is about creating accessible social media for those who are deafblind. So last week's webinar was more general. This one is very specific, how to create accessible social media. Haven't mentioned video transcripts. That is definitely one way to make sure that videos are accessible. If you go to the Inclusion 101 webinar page for DRF, I have posted last week's recording, and then you see underneath it, I have a Word document that's the video transcript. The other 2 articles, one is Persons with Deafblindness, the Left Behind and the Left Behind Error. And a Leave No One Behind error, pardon me. So this is an article I wrote a couple of years ago about how to include people who are deafblind. The other article is about how to include people who are deafblind during the COVID era. So a lot of these resources have a lot more information. So I'm running out of time to talk about all these different issues. But these 3 resources have a lot of valuable tools to help teach you. I'm going to pause right here because I want to give people an opportunity to ask me some questions. Let's do another interpreter switch if that's needed. And Alice, my colleague, will read a few questions.
Thank you, Carrie. This is Alice, and I'm going to wait for the interpreter switch, which has just happened. Okay, so the first question that we have is, can you provide some of the existing guides for accessibility requirements and measures for persons with deafblindness?
I can. So the 3 articles that you see in front of you on this PowerPoint are some of the resources where you can find, including how to create accessible social media for those who are deafblind. I just see the slide went backwards, but yes, on this. Let's see, next question.
Thank you. This is Alice speaking. Which social media platform is the deafblind community more inclined to use or more interested in?
Facebook. But people can use other platforms. And again, not everyone prefers the same thing. So I like Facebook, and I know most people who are deafblind prefer Facebook. Next question.
Thank you. Alice speaking. And this is something that I believe Haben spoke about, but I wanted to ask you as well. So you told us something about palm language. Is that mode also included in accessible language?
It's a short version, so sometimes people don't have the opportunity to get a full education or to learn. So sometimes the palm language is just a way to say, like perhaps to say no, and the palm would just draw the letter and then oh. But you have to assume that the person knows the words and how they're spelled. Next question.
This is Alice again. So for events, rallies, other types of large gatherings, what can the event organizers do to be inclusive for a guest with deafblindness?
Okay, so in the article, DeafBlindness, the Left Behind and the Leave No One Behind era, there are guidelines on how to make your event accessible. The important thing is to make sure that the communication access is in place. And also understand that not many sign language interpreters around the world are familiar with how to do tactile sign interpretation. So that it's important to work with deaf organizations who have interpreters and ask them to learn how to do tactile sign language. Sometimes it doesn't require any additional training. It's about practice, trying to learn how to use sign language, but through touch. And I'm going to, before asking more questions, I'm going to say that a few things that I would like to see from disabled person organization, or what we call DPOs. I would like for DPOs to do a few things. I would like for organizations of the blind and organizations of the deaf to work together more. It seems that these two communities often can be reluctant to work with the other because they're not sure how they can communicate with each other. But these two organizations are the ones that are the most likely to be able to help those who are deafblind. I would like both organizations to be more creative about finding ways to communicate. I would like for the deaf organization to learn Braille. Why? Because there is a need for Braille trainers who know sign language. I'm lucky that I have one of the few interpreters in all of the state of Massachusetts who knows Braille and sign language. If I had a Braille teacher who did not know sign language, I don't think I could have been able to learn Braille. The other thing I would like is for deaf organization to offer a unique, tailored sign language classes for those who are blind or visually impaired. This may seem like it's impossible. It's not. It just means you need to be creative. So for example, this is the letter A. And now describe the letter A. The letter A is almost like in the starting position, you make a fist. Now you move your thumb outward, so it almost looks like you're hitchhiking or you're pointing to the left side of the room with your thumb. That's how you teach somebody with a visual impairment sign language. You can do it with audio descriptions. In addition to including more trainers who know sign language and who know Braille, I would like for organizations to be inclusive of people who are deafblind. People who are deafblind are the most marginalized disability group within the disability rights movement. It's now time to ask them what they need, to ask them to come to the table, to be part of decision-making processes, and to take the lead. Because Haben and I hope we both demonstrate to you all that it's possible. And now I realize we're just a little past the hour, and I would like to thank everyone for being here. Again, I realize many of you probably have more questions. Let me go back to the next slide, the last slide. Okay, here is the information. If you have questions, you can email me. My email address is kThompson@disabilityrightsfund.org. I hope you can join next week's webinar, which is going to be about accessible and inclusive virtual spaces. How do you have accessible Zoom meeting? Good question. Join us next week to find out. And the recording for today's webinar will be up on the Inclusion 101 webpage by next Monday. Again, if you need to see last week's recording, you can go to the Inclusion 101 page and see last week's recording, or you can go to DRF's YouTube channel, or you can visit DRF's Facebook page today where I posted. So thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.